The world I custom generated is a cruel and necromancer infested place. The war is already lost, the kingdom is gone, and now a small group of refugees headed by the upstanding Lorebomb hopes to make a safe haven in this dangerous place. But all this recent violence is still weighing down their souls, so they promise a peaceful existence where they don't hurt anything directly. Is that even possible in these cold lands, or are they doomed to die beneath the necromancer's fist? The king himself chose this site as a place for the kingdom's refugees. The volcano to the northeast and strong river to the southwest will both help keep everyone alive. The thick forest would provide plenty of wood, but the land itself is now haunted and a toxic sludge rains down just a day after they arrive. Dwarves track it everywhere they go and vomit uncontrollably. Oh, and there's even demon rats to greet them. They are no doubt a lesser familiar some warlock is using to spy on the necromancer's behalf. Everyone rushes inside to store the last supplies and start mining out something that can eventually be a home. They quickly make room for a small economic hub and for a few farms before they begin making floodgates to eventually harness magma power to handle the undead, no doubt already on their way here. That magma will eventually go in a pacification chamber that the miners begin channeling out at the front of the fortress. That lava is also going to help fuel a slew of economic buildings like magma forges and glass furnaces. Unfortunately, no chamber can stop the sludge outside from forcing animals to stay indoors or their stomachs from rumbling when they can't graze. The dwarves quickly burrow down, breach the caverns below, and set up a small place for them to graze, though those animals are going to move to grazing on safe fungal growths at the top of the fortress before long. The caverns will help a lot more in the future, but the entrance there is going to need a pacification chamber of its own before there's any kind of long-term opening. If anything gets past that and into the fortress proper, the outpost will fall without a military. To stop exactly that from happening when the undead inevitably arrive, dwarves build bridges at the front and floodgates near the volcano. The latter lets everyone siphon lava while the fortress siphons migrants from nearby settlements that couldn't weather the undead's attacks. The fools still believe in weapons and the military, but Godmere gives them the chance to prove that they are something greater. And these aren't just extra hands. These dwarves represent hope in the face of a cruel world. There's the possibility that more survive fleeing the capital and that the kingdom itself can be rebuilt on their shoulders. With pleasant thoughts lifting their spirits, dwarves descend down near the caverns to start making bedrooms nestled against the walls. Doing it like this is very impractical, but I like how it looks, and not fitting too many bedrooms in isn't a problem when there's so much death in the world. The newcomers will help do plenty of work in the future, but they're doing a better job of working through all the booze and food right now. And though there are plenty of plants to forage on the surface, there's unfortunately just as much toxic sludge out there. The animals feasting on fungus can always be cold for a quick meal, but who wants to eat such a cute llama? Despite being so small, the fledgling fortress still attracts a diplomat and traders from the Silver of Tundras. It's the reformed government hoping to re-establish itself after the last one's collapse. They've come hoping to integrate the Fortress of Godmere into their nation. But for now, we only agreed to trade next year and see what each side can offer the other. Dwarves do need each other now more than ever, but opening up the heart of the fortress is risky. What if these guys are all just a bunch of thralls or traitors to the undead army? Such seemingly friendly visitors are a good reminder that not all will be. Miners finally channel at the volcano so that lava floods the tunnel past open floodgates until, after a while, it reaches both the economic center hoping to harvest it and the precipice of a trap. The dwarves hold some disdain for metal because of its ultimate failure against the undead before, but it's still useful for some projects where stone or wood won't do, and it's not like any of them will be holding metal goods for too long. More migrants continue seeking shelter from the sludge and the undead alike. Their arrival inspires more hope and brings smiles that were rare for most of the last year. It's enough for the dwarves to come together and start laying out space for a clothier and a soap maker so that they can attain some sense of normalcy, further fostered by a dining hall, even if the occasional demon rat makes a mockery of the idea. But no amount of demonic pests make culture any less important, and they start making instruments, glassware, and traditional dwarven outfits to help revive the customs that the undead tried to kill. The new bedrooms are looking fine, but they're all missing some basic furniture. Ubul has really been enjoying making glassware, so much so that she volunteers to design everyone's cabinets and chests, though though some dwarves still prefer good old-fashioned rock. Normalcy continues returning with a temple for prayer and a tavern that only takes citizens to avoid letting in secretly undead creatures or fearsome werebeasts. The rest of the winter fades, and to celebrate the New Year's, they invite friends over. Look, there they are, Oh, those are not friends anymore. Everyone retreats to the peace enforcement headquarters, even if some of the dwarves worry everyone by waiting a little bit too long before deciding to go. The undead stumble onto the bridges before someone above flips the lever. Stone snaps upward, tossing the undead into the ceilings, then letting them drop down into the pit below. More levers are pulled, and lava freely flows out as the bridges are lowered once again to both trap them in and let that lava flood down to the lower levels. Magma slowly creeps at them until, with neither direction nor hope, the undead burn. Smoke billows and the threat dissipates. But it would be wrong to say that nothing but their gear is left. The faint smell of burned, rotted flesh smells good this time. No one had to risk their life on the front line, and everyone was kept safe. It's possible to keep the undead at bay forever like this. Everyone grabs a drink and celebrates the victory, even if it is partial. Half the undead force is still dancing about where they originally encroached, and they seem too busy vomiting from the sludge to attack, even though the entrance has nothing obstructing it or the smell of vitality from leaking out. Now, variety is the spice of life, so I don't just want to be using this one trap forever, but undead can't drown and can shake off a lot of normal damage, so I can't get too creative with them. The entrance is going to be reorganized to allow pass to the side for more traps before the undead actually breach the fortress. As nice as it was to just have to pull a few levers that deal with them, this next trap shouldn't even need that attention. A couple single tile bridges go in these smaller tunnels. They install a pressure plate, set it to go off when anything heavier than a dwarf steps on it, then wire it to those nearby bridges. And though this is overall pretty simple, it's still a lot more complicated than the long straight tunnel going in on the other side of the entrance. But this bridge trap should be pretty much impossible to get past. Maybe. No one was a combat engineer before the kingdom fell, but they're all giving it their best. The undead finally get another order to stop dancing around and attack, so they start to encroach even though they've had an entrance in this entire time. It's perhaps foolish to let them in over that initial bridge and make their way to the newest trap, but it's better to test it now, and I think my reaction while recording really says it best. Holy shit, that worked! Look at how well that worked. Just in case you missed that, stepping on the plate flips the bridges, which sends the enemy beneath, before the bridges come crashing back down and instantly destroy whatever is beneath them. The trap resets itself, so any other undead that did come in would meet a similar fate. The only improvement to make is extending the rightmost tile, since the leader was a single tile from getting past it and killing everyone inside the fort. A path back will feed any undead that survive back towards the entrance after the trap has been triggered, in case someone does sneak by, but that won't work on everything, necessitating another trap on the left in that long tunnel. A support beam keeps the floor above actually above it, while the lone connector tile out there is dug out. Pressure plates lining the hallway are linked to the support beam. This is simple and powerful, but it's really expensive to reset. Unfortunately, while the terror of the undead has spurred all of this work, it's left the fortress itself so poor that refugees would rather die to the undead than live here. The glass items that Ubel makes can be mass produced pretty easily, and they're worth a fair bit, so she begins churning them out to help decorate the fortress. The rest of the dwarves begin delving down into the caverns below to start setting up the bridge trap that everyone's still infatuated with. It should keep them safe from anything in the caverns, though they don't finish before a liaison and traders from the Silver of Tundras arrive. They wanted trade last year, and they're gonna get it this year. It's a good thing too, since I'm not sure they'd make another trip here past all that vomit-inducing sludge if it was a fruitless visit. At least it proves that they're sincere when they discuss integration with Godmirror. We asked for lots of leather next year and buy the single crate they have now while offering a sample of the fine glass goods that Ubel makes. Hopefully the ride back isn't too bumpy. As impressed as they are now, things are just ramping up, and their next visit will fill their pack animals with exquisite garments, the most beautiful glass pieces imaginable, and some silver amulets. Metal is still too untrustworthy for weapons or even traps, but it's pretty enough for crafts, and legends say that silver protects from the undead anyways. With the bridge trap near the caverns ready after 3 long months that would have been much shorter had I used blocks instead of boulders for building, they start tentatively eyeing what's out there. There are a lot of creepy beasts and hostile serpent people that say they're bored and uneasy yet refuse to leave. Unfortunately, a tier decides to test whether the new entrance's levers are working properly and is the first dwarven victim of their own engineering. That's gonna need to be a closed barrel funeral. The other miners open up the cavern proper, letting ferocious beasts charge the defenses or not. Godmir's enemies really just like hanging out. They don't even come running when the sound of an axe striking at tall trees rings out. At least walling some space off is safe for now, though the enclosure is not finished before the second year comes to a close. This new year is not marked by another undead siege, which is good enough reason for song. Ubel, the miner not the master glassmaker, and Arush simulate instruments they don't have as they recall lovely songs from before civilization crumbled. It's just the two of them, but this is a reminder to embrace their culture a little bit more. It prompts the start of a grand library to store records of what was, though it will take a while for dwarves to write down their knowledge of crafts or their history. The glassmaker Ubel hones their work and asks everyone for help making clear glass items, which are worth far more but require everyone else lend a helping hand. They turn ash into potash into pearlash to combine with the sand she's used for green glass before. This is a pretty good way to turn extra manpower the fortress doesn't yet have into more money. Word about the extravagance now uncommon in this world is enough to draw lots of migrants, and the fortress almost doubles in population overnight. More glass statues continue decorating the library, and it's really shaping up. It's even got the dwarves pondering topics, though that is not the same as actually writing. Making paper requires grinding pigtails down into a slurry, then turning that into paper before finally binding those into quires. But they do show that they at least remember the history as they inscribe it on statues while they grow pigtails in the caverns. The fortress's first legendary artifact is made by a child possessed by some unseen force, but I'm more worried about the were lizard they decorated it with. How common are were creatures that children know what they are and how to inscribe them? In unrelated news, it's time to start working on another peace induction box. The current ones are great, but they were only meant to handle small undead scouting incursions. They lack the raw killing power to handle larger forces. Word that Godmir plans to be able to handle such attacks draws more migrants that will hopefully not mind the literal cobwebs in some of their bedrooms. At least some of them get nice windows they can peer out into the caverns through. Not that they need windows to hear the storming of undead boots above them. A lot of them. They know their window is closing, but they're here to seize it. The 3 smaller traps will have to do since the new army slayer isn't even close to ready. Some abominations dance at the edge like their former friends did, while more still charge. Though it would be easy to kill them on the first bridge, the new trap to the left instead gets tested out and it's dead. The pressure plates they trigger blow the nearby support and collapse the floors above. The chaotic mess kills 3 heavily armored soldiers, which only leaves too many. More levers are flipped, flipping the entrance back and forcing the undead to walk through the other side. Some flee through the dark tunnels, but the bridge they wandered in over flips and blocks their sought-out path with more molten magma. A few stragglers stumble into the pressure plates on the right. Both bridges would go up, but someone forgot to wire the new one. That doesn't stop the first from pulverizing more undead, and only a few of them are actually left to linger around and chase wildlife about. The foul necromancer must be too distracted to give them more orders. Villagers try to get a little bit more work done when the attack resumes. At least the kid they're going after doesn't have a head to lop off. DeCoste is pretty hard to kill because he's an undead creature too, but he still flees, jukes a swordsman, and makes a break for it. A raider hits a switch, DeCoste knows what's coming and tries to flee, but it's too late, and the bridge claims a more friendly victim. A terrified Litash saw everything as other undead attacked him, but he makes it past the bridge and cowers around a corner. Dwarves try to flip the lever to open that front up as he claws against it, hoping to be saved. They are not getting saved. One final smash with a fixed setup ends the raid with 2 friendly deaths, both kids. One of them even made the first legendary artifact here. That raid was so strong because they killed and revived the merchants that were supposed to arrive in early autumn. That means that not only could the fort not protect its most vulnerable, but that the Silver of Tundras may think it's too dangerous to come next year. All that work, improving the culture and reviving it, can't actually be shown to anyone, and migrants are only going to hear about the swath of undead cutscene heading here and not the place's survival. The traps are reset in solemn silence. The collapsing trap cost 65 blocks and only killed 3 creatures, so it will more than likely only be used as an emergency once the next ones are prepared. Without any bodies to bury, the missing children are instead memorialized with carved slabs that will be displayed in a new crypt. It's small for now, but they still leave it someplace that can be expanded as it's needed. Then they sing and socialize to remember the children as part of a memorial service. The little pleasures in such a cruel world helps them build resolve. The fortress needs to be more to stop that, and that starts with places of learning. They make and decorate a farmer's guild hall with exquisite statues and decorations near the library, where they hopefully have plenty of knowledge to teach future generations. Others choose to instead take up pickaxes to speed up the work on the massive army killing chamber that should have been ready. They leave only a few small columns connected by bridges, but unlike the main trap, this one features a long drop. It might not be enough to kill the undead through their unnatural resilience, but there's only one way to do dwarven science. This is going to be a background project that miners work at when they're not handling anything else, since it's going to take a long time and there's lots of other work to do. A more demanding project is the dwarven water power plant that will fuel both paper production and the next trap that comes in the form of a large ramp near one of the paths in. A line of fortifications will stop enemies from clambering up the hill, but before it's even close to finish, a forgotten beast roars echo through the caverns. These creatures are terrifying juggernauts, and even worse, this one is fast. Luckily, the walls down there stand strong and it runs past the village. The other creatures down here aren't so lucky though. They've spent years breeding, but the beast quickly rectifies that. It does pick up some injuries, but none that stop it from murdering dozens of them with claws and poison vapor. You know, this actually gives me an idea for another type of trap I hadn't planned. I might overuse bridges, but they're a great way to deliver intruders to wherever they're needed, and in this case, that's a pit that I'm going to try and bait that forgotten beast into. It's still alive after massacring the cavern wildlife for over 2 weeks straight. An idea this idiotic is a good enough call for self-reflection that someone writes an actual choir about Godmere itself. Having a more comprehensive history of where they came from would be nice, but an account detailing their attempts to survive here is almost as good. It'll be a nice thing for archaeologists to find in a dozen years after the forgotten beast moves on from what it turned into ruins. Scribes will make copies after the more recent migrants finish reading to their heart's content to catch up on what they missed. To celebrate that and more culture to come, the shrine hosts a small museum with 3 artifacts already made here and room for a 4th, but the new wooden bracelet put in there highlights the impending supply issue with logs. The constant rain of sludge above makes harvesting them there unsavory, and the caverns below are walled off to stop little minor threats like the forgotten beast that's yet to be trapped from invading. But the latter can eventually be handled, so dwarves start making plans to have fallback points so they can eventually move into the caverns proper. New migrants in newly prepared bedrooms bring the population up to 64. Cog wanted to inspect the cogs a little bit too much. That won't stop progress on the pit, with a way towards the caverns on bottom and a way to pump lava in as a kill switch on the right. Further above, the slope is prepared with minecart tracks outfitted with rollers that will launch minecarts at the path. Working on the 3 traps at once might have proven to be slightly too much though. The forgotten beast apparently wandered off before the pit was fully prepared for it. Well, the next forgotten beast will have to do it instead. At least that means it's safe to get wood from the caverns, or not. Serpent people were apparently just waiting for a chance to invade. The dwarves going for lumber are as good as gone while the bridge is pulled up behind them. This whole pacifism thing really makes dealing with stuff like this really difficult. But we want the Silver of Tundras to see that we're a stable base, not besieged by enemies at all times. Everyone retreats higher to the fort before the bridge is opened up so that these raiding snakes can enter the trap. It triggers again and again and again to make sure they don't give dwarves a hard time going forward. Only a few serpents that got stuck after climbing up a tree are left. Still, too much dwarven blood now fertilizes these cavern grounds. The survivors return to plant crops and gather the miasma-leaking corpses for burial. 10 good dwarves died, and their sacrifice will not be soon forgotten. The logs they chop down mean the fortress can continue growing and advancing. That starts with a line of gear assemblies and water wheels that will eventually route power all over the fort. Before that can be carved out and finished though, fall arrives, and more undead fall upon the fortress instead of the merchants we really need. The undead dance about and want a parley? Even if that were true and not just some trick of theirs, their relentless attacks before prove that their once are at odds with god mirrors. That does not prompt their attack despite a seemingly open entrance, but there's still a huge problem. They're waiting to ambush a caravan that should come soon. Locum steps up with a plan. Even though she has neither weapons nor armor, she volunteers to lead the undead that just want to keep an eye on us into attacking. After taking one last moment appreciating the fortress and the troll visitor that's just casually changing colors as it strolls up. Oh, it's peaceful though. Locum eventually slips past it to make her way outside. It prompts the undead to leave a trail of sludge on the approach, but instead of finding Locum, they descend on a miner out hauling something, murder them, then group up to feast on the body. Olan the doctor is also outside for some reason, and he's quickly shot and murdered as well. The fact that they decide to wander off after is at least a little bit relieving. No doubt the necromancer in charge needs them attacking some other nearby settlement instead, but Godmere is safe for now, and a caravan even arrives. Traders start unloading their goods as Godmere shares tales of what's happened and shows them fine, clear glass. It's either worth far less than anyone here thought, or the traders are lying about how much they'll pay for it, but it'll buy plenty of boxes of cheap leather regardless. The liaison meets with the mayor Dodok, who ebbed out Lorebomb at winning the hearts of the citizens. He shares news, and apparently the homeland is doing much better. The king has a litany of minor nobles, many of whom are only alive because Godmere handled the huge attack that was supposed to raise settlement after settlement last year. They want us to join them as a proper barony after showing our goods to the rest of the empire and prove that we can grow into an economic powerhouse that means a created wealth of over 100,000 dwarf bucks. Contact with the homeland is a good cause for celebration, and everyone starts making more instruments to party with after a long day of working on a complicated labyrinth. Another forgotten beast comes up to hopefully join our traps and stop any undead that are trying to do just that. The top of the pit still needs more work, but the bottom only needs suitable bait in the form of a sacrificial goat. Levers flip bridges to section off the pit and open it up to the caverns, causing the beast to run up to get to the goat. But after it devours them, it finds itself trapped by bridges it can't destroy on either side. The top of the trap is prepared with a familiar setup that'll drop enemies into their impromptu zoo, then reset so that their friends can find out wherever they went firsthand. Now all that's left is the big cavern and water power for a pair of minecart traps. Water wheels only need water beneath them to provide power through axles and gear assemblies that can be easily routed off anywhere it's needed. That's interrupted by the production of one of the first artifact instruments I've seen, but it more than fits Godmere. The gentle notes that come alongside cheery singing aren't quite as loud as the horns of war that come from serpent people, but bridges go smash 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 until there's only silence. One straggler surprises everyone on their way back down after they somehow snuck past the trap, but the dwarves gang up on them and beat them to death in a very pacifistic way. It was an accident they stumbled across, so this does not count as failing the challenge. Still, committing violence makes the remaining villagers agree to what's basically a group therapy session, with over a quarter of the dwarves that are left socializing in the dining hall near a lot of statues of themselves and one goblin for some reason. The library is comparatively empty. No one's written more or transcribed the one book we have yet. The wiki says that this can take decades, so it isn't too surprising, but it is still disappointing. It's probably hard to have the energy for writing when your life is so bad that the troll silently watching you for over a year is apparently getting used to tragedy. I'm pretty sure this new guest is also used to tragedy. An undead commander wants to visit, not to attack, but just to see what's here. She's literally raided dozens of places, but I'm sure she just wants an innocuous chat. She comes in, checks out the lever room and doctor's office for 3 minutes, then leaves without a word. No, that's not true. She befriended Erdem. Yeah, everyone's definitely going to be keeping an eye on him going forward. Migrants arrive right as the current occupants fill out the tombs. It's not the best omen, but that doesn't stop 20 newcomers from calling this place home. And then the same trolls before comes back almost immediately after leaving. Maybe this place is just that great. Or more likely, they met some undead on the way out. Maybe the troll needed a really powerful weapon to defend themselves with. I don't know, say a really powerful iron warhammer? God damn it, Alath. I thought I was gonna lose this challenge to the undead, not a strange mood. It's not a coincidence that even making such a wretched creation draws an Eton too big for the bridge trap to actually flip up or crush. That means most of the traps here won't work, but fortunately, the collapsing trap packs enough of a punch. I know we kept that expensive sucker around for a reason. Now the biggest problem is hauling off the nearly 14,000 pound corpse. With apparently more than just undead out there, we need traps capable of handling huge creatures that don't rely on bridges. A minecart trap should be able to handle that pretty well, although I am winging this, so it's really just a toss-up. The idea is pretty simple. Fortifications at the bottom of the ramp let projectiles through. We load minecarts with things, shoot them at fortifications, fortifications at speed, and then minecarts and or what's in them phases through fortification to hit enemies at that speed. But the first test is not very projectile-y. I did a bit of reading and it turns out that minecarts need to be launched over an open space to become projectiles, and only some items will shoot through without that. Mostly ammunition, which making would definitely count as a weapon, unlike minecarts, which are fine to shoot at your enemies. Godmere just really cares about high-speed public transport for its invaders. Though this test failed, someone tested the fall in the cavern to make sure that it is lethal. Dwarven engineering will never change. Minecart testing is slowed down by a child who decides to play literally right in front of the minecart. I swear that dwarves actively want to have accidents. Once they move, the cart flies through the fortifications, but what's inside doesn't shoot everywhere like I'd hoped. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with using blocks instead of smaller items, but since we can't make a shotgun, this is gonna be more like a heavy-duty railgun. Hopefully it can handle whatever Egesh the necromancer commander has planned. Apparently her handwriting was really sloppy, so she came back to check her notes on which traps have weaknesses before she attacks. Thankfully, she doesn't check out the minecarts or the freshly finished cavern trap. You think you might be stressed because you're just watching the snakes walk up? Of course, if I'd known how many attacks would be coming from the caverns, I would have built more traps here. I just kind of assumed the nearby necromancer tower would be more of a threat than some angry slitherers underground. They'll only be a problem if they get past this lone trap. Oh god, no. Oh god, yes! Whoever you are, your sacrifice will not be in vain. Even if I do have to wait a week to actually find out who we aren't supposed to be forgetting. It's time for rectifying my mistake and building more traps down here, which involves a long, thin path near some channels. While that gets torn out, it's time to take stock of the rest of the fortress. All these attacks have meant that there hasn't been much planting going down in the caverns, so the pigtail crop is going to be weak this year. Fortunately, we have plenty of paper that needs to be turned into a choir to be used, but I guess watching most of your friends die gives you writer's block. The litany of accidents and attacks killed both the leatherworker and tailor we had, though there's still plenty of glassware to sell to merchants that arrive in early autumn. Migrants even arrive in time to see this obscene generosity. Attracting more will be easier if the merchants leave with tales of their great wealth here, so all of the accumulated metal and glass crafts are sold off. Even buying everything the merchants have leaves Godmere down almost 30k, but the tales they tell over doubles the fortress's wealth once again, though it will have to double again before Godmere is considered a proper barony. While looking around at other stuff, I noticed that someone carried the corpse of the first forgotten beast up from the caverns. It must have died to the serpent people that attacked us as soon as we opened the way in. The temple was waiting for a fourth artifact, but really, I think a forgotten beast corpse is an artifact. But what's really impressive is how they managed to stuff everything into that glass display case. Maybe we could try and stuff a werebuffalo corpse in there beside it. Yeah, that is gonna be a problem. It seems like one of the migrants was infected and now they're past the traps. But despite that, everyone nearby literally can't help but punch at the beast. Fortunately, the troll that's still here punches a lot harder to thank us for killing the Eat and hunting it. The threat's not over yet though, since the beast bit plenty of villagers and at least some of them will turn before long. The villagers could do with an in-depth inspection of any of the traps, but I think the new one deserves a special showcase. Everyone involved in the fight heads either down to the thin bridge or to the hospital, and I'm just gonna go ahead and bar off. Werebuffaloes aren't strong enough to break down glass doors, right? Lava falls dozens of levels and surrounds the island while the dwarves on it plead for their lives. But everyone else yells out that only Ilrail is bleeding from the beast. The others were heroes, but one mistake could doom everyone. Oh, I really don't know if this is the right call, but I'm gonna sacrifice only Ilrail and the pair in the hospital sporting more serious injuries. We can't afford to lose too many more. Other accidents and invaders have depleted the 10 miners we originally had. That doesn't stop Godmere from amassing more and more wealth in hopes of eventually joining the Silver of Tundras as a proper barony. We're definitely not going to tell them about the werebuffaloes duking it out of the hospital. It looks like 2 of the 3 were infected, but after one kills the other, the remaining civilian is still passed out. The dude is a deep sleeper. After he wakes up covered in blood and naked, Maffel realizes the others were right to be worried and accepts the only plausible outcome. The werebuffalo threat is no more. The stress of it all isn't weighing on most people, but the occasional dwarf loses it and flies into a violent rage, forcing others to put them down to preserve the sense of peace. Well, if they can't have safety, let them have masterfully made statues decorated with gemstones. The museum shapes up even more, and really, nothing can go wrong here, except a vampire hidden amongst the dwarves' ranks, or some kind of sneaky beast infiltrating. It could be just about anything in these lands, but none of it's good. Well, I can join the list of threats, which is pretty much just serpent people as of late. Oh, I had to say something. Wait, it's already dead? The serpents apparently poisoned and massacred it almost immediately to prove that they're the biggest threat out there. Unfortunately, while the carts are going properly, they're not spitting magma up because they aren't quite touching it. I think the fix requires draining all the magma first, which is going to take months the fortress might not have, as long as the undead keep showing they're interested by sending their commanders to scout it all out. The original Bleak commander came back a few times, and now she sends both a lieutenant and a fell corpse in quick succession. But there's never a siege, it's always just more serpent people. I'm getting worried that I won't get to introduce any undead to the Forgotten Beast, Deep Pit, or Minecart Railgun. How did a serpent person manage to get through the traps, climb the entire fort, and then find the petting zoo? Dwarves don't defend the animals, which don't really seem to fight back on their own, so the serpent racks up dozens of kills. They eventually disappear, but the combat log doesn't say they died, so they were erased by the power of pacifism? Well, I guess there is a downside. Our tombs are so full. The dwarves are even starting to rebel against the core ideas of pacifism by continuing to make weapons and armor artifacts as often as they can. I think that's 3 in a row now? Oh god. They turned a serpent into a necromancer warlord that decides they want to chill in the water intake. At least they don't want to spy on anything further in. Maybe they just want to see how the vampire they planted in the fortress is doing. It's still killing someone every once in a while, and there are no leads on it. Wait, where did an undead creature come from? Why is there one out here? Why are dwarves drowning? Oh, the serpent necromancer is acting as a siren, luring dwarves to their death, letting them drown, then reviving them as undead to attack. But the absolute worst part is that they refuse to actually push into the fortress to test one of the new traps. But the process is slow, and this seems to be an attempt to grow the army rather than destroy Godmere. I am more worried about the next siege because of this though. Autumn arrives, and the caravan eventually comes shortly afterwards. Finally. It took hundreds of fine clothes, meals, crafts, and more, but the fortress has accumulated the wealth and prestige needed to be considered a proper barony. Lorebomb gets the promotion that he's worked for 5 hard years. He's joined by only 1 of the original 7 dwarves and 3 of the original 20 that were here. Everyone else perished. The kingdom can be regrown, and that certainty is part of why Godmere was given this title. The rest of the government, our government, looks to see how Godmere handles such a peaceful life in such dangerous lands. The magma eventually fills up the basin, and it's time to let the latest serpent raids in. A forgotten beast would join them in attacking, but it's also instantly murdered by the serpents. No, only these scary, scaly monsters will get to wander over and be burned to a fine crisp. Just ignore the dwarven stuff on the left side of the bridge. I ended up using Twisted Logic Gaming's tutorial on this trap, so check the link in the description if you want a better understanding of how this works and how I messed it up before. But in short, the minecarts are kicking up magma mist, which burns anything it touches. I want to try the other traps, and the vampire makes a bold kill in one of the guild halls. There's actually no way to know who it is for certain, but Logam certainly looks the part. She's reserved and callous too, which sounds like a vampire to me. Remember, it's only bad to hunt witches. I do have to manually activate it, but oh, I kind of forgot that rollers need track connecting them to the ramp. I'm glad the terrifying ring leader plague ghoul is just here to scout things out and not lead a ring of other undead against Godmere. The almost definitely vampire is dropped in to meet the forgotten beast, who stops them from ever attacking again. The big cavern? Well, that's just waiting for the undead that are too cowardly to— They weren't supposed to call my bluff like that. Oh no, this is even worse than I thought. Those big guys aren't quite forgotten beast, but they are able to avoid pressure plates. The undead scouts no doubt told the necromancer what awaited them here, and they brought a lot of the big guys to get past those. The enemies rush the gates, and the only hope Godmere has is dwarves pulling the levers to the half of traps that can be controlled by them, while the enemies run up, and the timing is tricky. The first one gets by before they can, but fortunately it walks up to get crushed as the entrance is flipped to the left. The next one is pulled too early, causing the enemies to run about in confusion. One enemy is dropped into the forgotten beast's chamber, but they die on impact, so Spot there doesn't get his fight yet. I really should have wired every bridge in the large cavern to a single lever, but with only the last bridge there connected, it's hard to actually catch the gigantic undead beast. Another is crushed. 3 more fall into the main pit at the entrance, and they're burned alongside a bunch of other lesser soldiers. Oh, that one's too close. Oh, flip the bridge in the gate. Come on, hurry, hurry! Oh no. Everyone was gathered in the temple to pray, but they heard the beast coming down the stairs, and this does not end well. Their slaughter is as effortless as it is endless. The only hope is fleeing down past the magma cart trap and hope— oh god, the serpents are still there. Nowhere is safe. Maybe some of them can get out? Everyone is told to flee here and hope the serpents have died to the magma first. No one in the temple can be saved, but in the library they're talking about social behavior? Hey, the undead are murdering everyone, but we have the moral high ground. I missed it actually firing tiring, but the definitely not a weapon minecart trap up top killed a total of 2 lesser soldiers. It was meant to be a heavy hitter that was good at taking out a couple big guys, but they just bypassed it. A couple of smaller soldiers finally trigger the pressure plates above the Forgotten Beast. One undead falls down to fight it, and then they win. Forgotten Beasts are just really not doing so well here. Half the population is gone. Without levers being flipped, the enemies flood in. The library is a mess. The temples are worse. A last-ditch effort to at least kill the undead with us by flooding the whole fortress with magma is never realized. There's no one to do it, and even if we did, there's still a half dozen more undead outside. They don't even need to send their entire force here. Instead, they announce their victory, and the Serpent Warlord Necromancer arrives to see what he's conquered. No, destroyed. Half a dozen dwarves hide in the labyrinth, but none of them are at the evacuation point. Godmirror has fallen, and there are no survivors. It's not looking good for the Silver of Tundras in this wretched land. This video was a little bit different for me, but if you enjoyed it, like this video, since it really does help out a smaller channel like mine, then check out some of my other content, like a Dwarf Fortress video where I embarked with absolutely nothing and ended up with a pretty unique run. I'm also thinking I might make a guide on how to better introduce roleplay to your playthroughs. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, let me know in the comments, then subscribe so you don't miss that or my next Dwarf Fortress playthrough.